So step one to making noodles is to have a completely clear countertop. Otherwise, you're going to have flour and little pieces of noodles shoved over everything that you've got. So just make sure you clear it off completely. Okay, this is the bowl that I always make noodles in. So here's reference size for my hand. All right, on the measurements for noodles, it's always 1 handful to each person that you're going to feed. I always make enough to feed at least 8 people simply because everybody eats more than one person. So when I do a handful, this is what it looks like in my hand. Now, if you got a bigger hand, smaller hand, you'll have to adjust. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So that's what that looks like. Now, if you have a really dry day, you may have to add more wet ingredients when we get to that. If it's a wet day, you may have to add more than just a handful. Just kind of depends on the weather. All right, so the next thing you want to add is salt. Without salt, your noodles aren't going to have any flavor. So you're looking for roughly, you're looking at a tablespoon. So probably do 2 of those. Just throw them in like that. Okay, next thing we're working with is eggs. Today, I have duck eggs. They came from your Uncle Ed. So, if you have farm fresh eggs, never just crack them directly into your noodle mixture. So, you're going to want to crack these, which if you have duck eggs, they're very hard to open. And I do not want every egg white. So, about half of these eggs, I am going to take off that egg white because I don't want it. And basically, you need, oh, this is going to be fun. So use your fingers. There's 2. You want at least 1 egg per handful of flour that you used. You do not need a fancy strainer. Just pinch off the goop. Whoop. And when you drop it, just use your hand, gently pick it up, pinch off the goop. I think because of the weather today, I'm going to use 5 yolks. And don't waste your egg whites. They are good. You can use them to make different, you can make an angel food cake. It's good just to whip them up, put them with extra eggs. They freeze really well. 1 regular egg will fit into the 1 spot in a ice cube tray. Duck egg, because they're twice the size, it will fill up 2 slots. So if you ever wanted to freeze any of your eggs, you can. All right, there's the 8 because we did enough for 8. Okay, next step is going to be adding the milk to the eggs before you mix them up. If you are starting out with this and you're not real confident on your measurements, save a half of your eggshell and you're going to fill it with milk twice. Since I've done this for a while, I kind of know how much I need. So you just pour it in there. Now here's the thing. If you're using regular chicken eggs, it's fine. It does not make a difference in the amount of eggs that you're going to use. You're just going to use however much milk you get in those eggshells. It just ends up working. I'm not sure how it does it, but it doesn't seem to matter. Because these are duck eggs, they are harder to mix up. If this had been regular chicken eggs, it already been good and mixed. So You just want it to kind of look like that. Just good incorporated, because you don't want any weird clumps of like egg white in your noodles. All right, so we've got that. Here's your flour bowl. You got your little pocket of salt that's in there. I do like to add in just a little bit of pepper, but that's my preference. Not everybody wants that, so you don't have to worry about it if you don't want to. All right, so this next step requires the noodle fork. I don't know who's going to inherit this, but this is what I use to stir up my noodles with. It's technically just a meat fork that you would get in any serving set that you would buy. So I just kind of fluff it up because I want to get that salt and I want to get that pepper kind of distributed a little bit. That way you don't have any pockets that are going to taste weird. So I tend to just kind of scrape it out to the sides a little bit. You don't want to go all the way down to the bowl because then you're going to have egg white, eggs that stick to the bottom. So you want to keep some flour in there. And then you just pour it in. And you tell it's duck eggs because it's stuck on the inside of the bowl like that. They are super thick. All right, then we're just going to kind of fluff some in and you start mixing. And this is why I like this fork, because it's sturdy. Otherwise, a regular fork, you're going to bend it. And here's the thing, if it's a dry day, and after a few minutes of working on this, it's not incorporating real well, you can add some more milk. Or if you can already tell that it's a little bit dry, which I'm feeling like it's a little dry on this one. Stir this up some more, kind of see where we're at. Yep, it's just a little bit dry. So we're going to just do a little bit more. I just kind of drizzle it. You don't have to be scientific about it. And if you add too much, you add some more flour. It's not going to make a big deal. So you can see where it's kind of crumbly. It's still got flour in there, but it's starting to kind of start packing together a little bit. All right, so now we get messy. If you got rings on, take them off. Now we're gonna get in there and just start turning and kind of squish, almost like you're kneading bread. Kind of get that flour in there. And you don't want to be super aggressive with it, but you do want to incorporate this. Now, if you've got a KitchenAid or a really good sturdy mixer, I highly recommend it. I have neither at this point, so I use my hands. But if you've got one of them, they will mix this very, very well. They will get it looking really good really quick. We are getting there. As you can see, it's still got dryness on the outside where we're catching flour, but it's starting to come together. And it's at this point, you'll know if it's too wet because it'll still be very sticky. And it'll want to stick to your hands and you're still going to be going. This is normal. This is just from where you first started. But if it's super sticky, it's going to want to like pull off at you. And you know you've got too much wet and you need to start incorporating some flour. Okay, so we're looking pretty good. And it's okay if there's some flour on the outside. That'll just help when you're rolling. But you can kind of see texture. Like you can leave it. It's kind of like Play-Doh. So we'll sit that back in there. And what I like to do is I like to cover mine up with a towel and just kind of let it rest so it relaxes a little bit. Okay, so when we left off, I was letting it rest. And I let it rest a little longer than normal. There was actually a whole nother section over here. So I cut mine into fourths. That way I just roll a fourth at a time. Before we get into that, I am going to talk about a couple of things. Rolling pin, doesn't matter if you use wood or marble. Both work great. You're going to want a really nice sharp knife. This is just to kind of cut your, once you've rolled it out, you're going to cut it into fourths so it's easier to cut with this. So I use this to cut my noodles with. This is actually like if you go to a kitchen store, you can find it, but it'll say it's to be used for mincing up like herbs. So like you would just mince up like mint and thyme and stuff. But it makes the perfect width for a noodle. So those are the basic things I use. I do keep a bench scraper on hand. It's kind of nice if you, for some reason underneath it gets a little sticky. It doesn't ruin your noodles if you need it. So I'll show you what I do here. So I'll take a ball and I'm just gonna kind of fold it in on itself. And you know, it's gotten very smooth while it sat. Always keep your flour over to the side just so you can sprinkle more on. It's better to put an excess of flour on than to not have enough on there and then you're constantly trying to add more so it's not sticking. But just kind of get that on there. All right. The easiest way to roll these is to have Zane do it, but since he's not here, I'm gonna roll it. But you just kind of roll it out a little bit, turn it over, roll it a little bit, and just kind of keep working it. Once it gets kind of oval shape, flip it, because you want to keep it moving so it doesn't have time to stick. Because if it starts to stick, that's when you get the bench scraper out and everything, and you got to really work it. I highly suggest that you have an apron on. This does make a mess. You tend to get flour everywhere. Every once in a while you just need to kind of throw it back on there. I like to flip mine once in a while. And basically you're just going to roll this out till you get it as thin as you want. Like if you like super thin noodles, you know, you're going to really work this for a little while. What's one catch? If you roll it thick, you can make dumplings and just cut it into squares and drop those in. I don't really care for dumplings. I feel like it's too thick of a dough for me whenever it cooks up. All right, that's good. So then I take that knife and cut it into quarters. Do not have to match, do not have to be perfect. Throw some flour on top so you can toss that one on top of the other. This one, I'll make sure it's in the, there we go. All right, so here's that herb mince thing that they said. I scoop up some flour in it so it'll constantly coat those blades. And you just take it and you roll it. I scoop mine to the side so I'm not cutting an edge of one whenever I go to the next section. There's that. And then I just kind of scoop up some of the flour and just kind of start shaking them. And there'll be some that stick together a little bit. I'm going to try and get this in the camera so you can see the width. So, probably like 1/8 of an inch thick. But you're just gonna pull these apart and make sure they're not stuck together. I like to stay connected sometimes, kind of like that, like it splits in the middle and each end is still there. Nothing big. Just kind of pull them apart, fluff them in the flour. make sure their edges are coated is what you're doing. You're just making sure, like I pulled that, so now it's got a raw edge. You just want to make sure that's coated in flour and everything. All right, so it's going to look like this when you get done. And it's just gonna, you're gonna pick up a little bit of the flour with it, nothing big, and then you'll take it and you'll lay these out across your, whether it's towels or you've got a old tablecloth, curtain, something that you can lay across your table that's preferably cotton or some type of cotton blend so it'll breathe, and then you can lay these on there. Okay, so I just told you about how I go and lay them out. So I use an old white, like cotton, it's like a tablecloth, but it fits perfect over my table. So I lay it on there, and then when I go to lay them out, you can just scatter them, or like I've done, you can kind of see where I've put mine in rows. Just makes it a little neater, and it makes sure that everything will fit. And like we were looking at this earlier, you know, I had 4 quarters. So basically I'm going to take another quarter again. I'm going to do this to all of them. And I'm just going to go through and I'm going to cut all these. I'm going to just repeat what I did before, where I separate them out and I make sure they've been tossed in the flour. Otherwise, when you put them over there on your table to dry, they'll start to stick again. This is what keeps them from sticking to each other and enables them to dry separately so that when you cook them, they don't turn into a big waddy mess. They will do that if they're too doughy. You do have to stir your noodles quite frequently, and you want them sturdy enough that they're not going to fall apart, but not so sturdy that they are a tough noodle. They can get a little too thick if they're too sturdy, like they're too thick, you haven't rolled them out enough. Some of yours will roll out thinner than others if they're on the edge, like these are super thin compared to the others, but they were on the edge. So, but no. That's how you roll out your noodles. And then once you've got them all rolled out and laid out, you just leave them alone. I like to at least let mine dry for a minimum of 6 hours. If you can do overnight, that's even better.